Hi, welcome back to Maras Around the World, Session 11, An Ocean of Plastic. Plastic pollution remains one of the most visible and pervasive threats to marine life, affecting ecosystems from shorelines to the deep sea. This session addresses the issue through a multidimensional lens with contributions focused on
ocean literacy and public engagement using education campaigns and participatory tools to raise awareness on the plastic life cycle.
Field-based recovery efforts from coastal cleanups to community monitoring, contributing to global datasets and local empowerment.
And scientific innovation, including research on bio-based materials, their production, biodegradability, and the potential to replace conventional plastics in key applications.
So we are joined today by Mares galore. We have a lot of current Mares students. So we're lucky to have three. Who are Mathilde Ekholm, who's a first-year Maris student, who's currently at the University Côte d'Azur on her internship. We have Nichelle Venkitachalam, who's a second-year Maris student, who also is in the same lab doing her internship. And we have a last-minute addition, Amy Green, who we saw in a previous session, who's at Blue Seeds.
And unfortunately, Angela Cumming, who was meant to be joining us, but there have been terrible thunderstorms in Canada, and she hasn't got power, and she still hasn't. She hadn't got power for a previous session. She still doesn't have power. So she should be here, but unfortunately, she's not able to make it.
Okay, so let's jump straight in with Mathilde. We would like to know about your experience with plastic pollution. You know, growing up in a world of plastic, doing an internship focused on plastic. What is your experience?
Well, my name is Mathilde. Sorry, My name is Mathilde Ekholm, and I'm doing the Master in Mares at Université Côte d'Azur. I'm currently doing my internship here in the south of France at the Institute of Chemistry in Nice. My project is part of a larger EU initiative, Suspense, focusing on the chemical recycling of bio-based thermoset plastics. Thermosets are incredibly durable materials and are often used in airplanes, wind turbines, and car batteries. But because they are impossible to melt, they are very hard to recycle, and they often end up in landfills at the end of their lives. That's why chemical recycling can be a very good alternative. The bio-based plastics we're developing are made using a molecule derived from brown algae, offering a way more sustainable alternative to petroleum-based plastics. Through this work, I'm helping to support innovation and the development of more sustainable industries, directly contributing to the goal of the SDG 9. I'm honored to be part of this exciting project, and I'm looking forward to keeping up the good work.
That was a very well-planned video. Thank you very much. So obviously coming from the kind of chemistry background, can you give us your experience of plastic pollution?
Well, I think as many others, when you see turtles strangled with plastic and all of these horrible pictures, you get affected. And I did too. So I started reading more about plastic pollution, and I found this incredible internship, which is more connected to the innovation of bio-based plastics. And I'm really, really enjoying it so far. We're trying to formulate and recycle bio-based thermosets that are partially made out of an algae molecule. So it's very exciting.
Fantastic.
And I guess let's keep it with Mathilde, that is there anything surprising you've encountered working in the kind of lab on plastics as kind of like a marine biologist, ending up working in that sort of environment? It seems a little bit counterintuitive, what's it been like?
Well, it's been very new to me to work in a material science lab like this. But what I think I enjoy the most is the fact that you can see the results. You can actually touch them and compare them. And it's a lot of trial and error for sure. But it's been very interesting. And I can share some slides to just let you know how it can look like. Because I know
sure, that'd be great.
Yeah, let's see. So here we go. This is well, how it can look like. So do you see the mouth? Let's see.
Yep.
Yes. Okay. So these are the plastics that we've created using the algae molecule, and these are recycled in a microwave, and and they come out looking like this. So it's very, well, let's see, on a small scale still. And after some treatments, we can get the recycled product that looks like this. May not look like you would expect it, perhaps. And these can later be treated and cured. And this is where we're at so far. So it's the point of these plastics are to be used in airplane industries and boating industries, and we have some time, or we have some stuff left to do, let's say, but we're getting there.
Fantastic.
I think perhaps if we could just jump to Nichelle now, because you've also kind of like worked in the same lab. I mean, I was wondering if you could share some of your experiences with working with these kind of like plastic alternatives, or kind of like what your work has been.
Yeah. So I did my previous internship at the same lab as Mathilda, so the Institut de Chimie de Nice, the same eco-compatible materials and polymers team. But I was working on a different project. So mine was a collaboration with the ICN and a private company, a startup called Lactips. And the point was to create a plastic alternative. So it was not a type of plastic. It was milk protein and natural plant-based material. It was kind of a hydrogel, and you could make films out of it. And during the duration of my internship, I tried to change the chemical nature of the plastic by some kind of polymerization techniques to change, to, in a way, broaden the applications of the product that they already had. So that's what I worked on.
I've a kind of big question then for you, and maybe Mathilde and Amy can jump in afterwards as well. So do you think the solutions to plastic pollution are in the lab, or they're in our lifestyle?
I think, it can't be one without the other for sure. I think it's as important, I think, lifestyle, but also you can't penalize the individual person. It's more like, I think, the institutional, like the government and things like that. I think the average person doesn't cause as much of a negative effect. It's still bad. The amount of plastic that we see on our shelves today is horrible, but I think you start from the top and you work your way down, but nothing can work without the other.
Amy, do you agree?
Yeah, and
Okay, sorry.
No, sorry. I was just going to say that I agree with what Nichelle says, that there's no one solution, but I do really think that reducing the amount of plastic that we actually use is very important, because almost half of all the millions of tons of plastic that we produce are only used once. So if we could change our behaviors and stop using, it would be very, very efficient.
Yes, and I have some slides I can share of just some photos, but I think the work that I did before was mostly in the cleanup side, so the other end of the plastic life cycle, and I think that's not a sustainable solution. So when we talk about plastics in the environment, cleaning them up is not the way that we're going to move forward. So just a little bit about what I've done in the plastics world is that over the past few years, I've gotten really passionate about plastics, and I worked on this sailing vessel. And so this is called the American Promise, and it's part of the Rosalia Project for a Clean Ocean. And they take volunteers every week of the summer in Maine. So it's in the United States. And we sail between the islands where a lot of lobster gear ends up washing up on these remote islands that are very difficult to access. And so it's difficult to clean up, but it's also difficult to prevent the plastics from ending up degrading in the environment. And so this is a picture of some of the gear that we cleaned up. But one of the most important things that we do is every piece of plastic that we find in the environment, we sort into piles. You can see some buoys in the middle there, the colorful bits. We find a lot of foam buoys that degrade very fast in the environment, and then lobster traps that are made out of plastic and metal, things that are often only used once. We also find a lot of single-use water bottles and things like that in the environment. So a lot of single-use things that, again, back to your question, Aziz, I think if we can reduce the amount of single-use items that we use, it'll make a huge difference. But one of the main things that we work on as well is to collect data. So every piece of plastic we pick up, we write down exactly what we found. And I think really this is the only way to be able to make change on the political scale, as you were saying, Nichelle. As we want to make change, we need to be able to know what's out there. We need to know what we're finding and know what types of items we're finding so we can ban them from being produced or hold the people accountable who are creating those items of plastic. This organization also is very cool. They do a lot of educational work. So we'll work with communities that as we move forward. And then I also put how we get some of the trash off of the island. So we have to work with local fishers. We're going to these remote islands and remote places. And so we do whatever we can. We pile it on boats. We move it across the ocean, just trying to get it out of the environment so it's not hurting animals anymore. And sometimes we even create art with it. There was a project where we had a fashion designer on board where we picked up rope from an island and we turned it into a dress that we ended up bringing to a presentation and presenting what you can do with marine debris maybe after it ends up in the environment. So that's just some of the work that I've done, but it's a question of circularity, I think, in my opinion. I don't know what you guys think.
No, thanks for sharing, Amy. In fact, it kind of anticipated the question I was going to ask you. But one of the themes through some of the sessions we've had is about how to engage with the public, how to increase public awareness, how to change habits or perceptions. So I was going to ask you, through your cleanups, how did you engage with people who, if you were able to engage with people who perhaps weren't necessarily activists or were in these communities, or how did you raise awareness? But it seems like you've had a range of, or your repertoire is quite expansive in terms of like how you do that. But if you had any more thoughts on it?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think one thing that I've found is that when we work with kids, they get really excited about picking up trash. It's like if you change their minds about what they're doing, it's an activity. You can write down what you find. It's almost like a scavenger hunt. Once they start, they can't stop. It's a game. And so I think if we can kind of change the narrative around, okay, this is something dirty, this is something on the ground. If we change the idea that this is ours, that we're going to pick it up and we're going to notice what we see and we're going to change how we view this environment that we're putting all this trash into, I think kids are maybe a good way to start doing that.
Yes, so you turn picking up trash into a passion. I was then wondering maybe if we can switch back to the lab work about how, for Nichelle and Mathilde, how do you feel that the work that you've done in the lab could be scaled out, or how does it move from the lab into kind of like practical applications across society, or how does that kind of transmission of science and biomaterials work?
Well, that's a good question, and I think that's one of the main challenges as well for these types of projects, because when it works on a lab scale, it needs to work really well for it to be able to be upscaled, and there needs to be funding. So the project that I'm currently in, it's a EU-funded project. So I think that's a good sign for the future upscaling of these materials, because there is a budget and there's a lot of people collaborating to make this happen. But for sure, this is one of the big challenges. I don't know what you're to say, Nichelle, about this.
Yeah, I think mine is a bit different, contrary to your situation right now, because my project was funded by, a company. They had the funding to have someone in the lab, doing R&D, and that's essentially what I did, was just, trying to change the product a bit to make it more usable for multiple different uses. So I think you can see on the screen right now, but so Care Tips, that was the product that I was working with. Again, it's made of like natural proteins, plant-based ingredients. It was and is still completely biodegradable and hydrosoluble. That's what made it especially interesting for the marine, like the ocean pollution side of things, is that it was intended to be hydrosoluble and non-toxic, so that 90% of plastic waste ends up in the ocean anyway. It's supposed to have less of an impact. So it's just shifting the end, cycle of the plastic product. But yeah, different problem, different situation with private funding. But
so you guys kind of have both experience with alternatives to plastic or different types of plastics that we can use. So my question, as someone not so involved in plastic, is why we have these solutions. What's stopping them being implemented in wider society? Why do we have them, but we don't actually utilize them? What's the blockade?
I think it all comes down to accessibility if we're just talking about these alternatives, they're oftentimes much, much more expensive than, the traditional petrochemical plastic version. And that's why plastics became so popular. They work very well and they're extremely cheap. And so it made sense that there was a boom in the plastic industry before people really even understood how bad they were. And so I think even with all of the alternatives that we've been talking about, the major downside and why you might not see it on your shelves very soon, or you might not see everyone switching to these alternatives, is just a lack of accessibility at the moment.
And to add on to that, when it comes to the recycling of the plastics, the standard PET plastics, for example, that are based on petroleum, we have the industries, or we have the means to recycle them. But when it comes to different types of plastics, different bioplastics, different materials, there are different ways of recycling as well. And at this point, we also need the industry, the machines, we need I'm losing the word. Yeah, the production, but also the place for the recycling to happen. And so I think there are a lot of great bio-based alternatives out there, but we're not ready to produce them large or in a bigger scale because we lack the means to treat them afterwards and to handle the waste.
I have a question for Amy, because I was involved in a few beach cleanups as well, and I was really surprised as to where the plastic was actually coming from. So I was in an island in the Indo-Pacific, and the trash was coming from all over, Australia, New Zealand, Japan. So do you have a kind of similar experience with this, or do you think the plastic pollution is more of a local issue?
It's a global issue, I think. And I think especially in a lot of islands in the Indo-Pacific is where trash from China and from a lot of maybe even the US, where it follows the currents and ends up in the Indo-Pacific, it's ending up being people's problem who are not producing those plastics. And so it's not fair to those people. And so I think one of the solutions besides recycling is extended producer responsibility models. And I've heard a lot of talk about that in the United States. It's growing a little bit. We hope that it continues to grow. And where the people who are producing that plastic are the ones responsible for finding the solutions for cleaning it up or creating the infrastructure to recycle it once it's at the end of life. But for instance, in Maine, we find that most of the trash that we pick up is from the lobster industry. That's relatively local, but we do find that we can locate the cache where it will wash up. So it's relatively easy to figure out where these islands are going to have the most trash, so we can make the most effort when we're cleaning up these areas. And I think perhaps in the Indo-Pacific, that's another place where we can put big effort into getting it out of the environment, because once it's in the environment, it will break down into microplastics, and it's much more difficult to clean up as a microplastic. And when it's a microplastic, it can also absorb all sorts of chemicals and toxins and have a much greater impact on the marine ecosystem, being eaten by plankton or getting up into the food chain. So cleaning up the macroplastic, even though it feels like a project that will never end, you can always keep cleaning it up. It's still really important to do, because otherwise it will end up as a much bigger issue that we can't really solve. So.
Yeah, so I guess maybe moving a bit more speculative back to the lab for Matilda and Michelle, are there any kind of innovations you're aware of, or projects you'd like to see implemented, either like experimenting with plastic alternatives, or with modifying the plastic you might be working with, any kind of like science fictional solutions that we should be looking for?
Well, I don't know how science fiction it is, but I've been working on this side project with a colleague in the lab, and where we're trying to incorporate muscle shells into bioplastics. And because mussels are great filter feeders that are a sustainable way to do aquaculture, but there's a lot of waste because all the shells, we don't use those. So this is kind of a cool project, I think, where you can combine valorizing the waste from one industry and also maybe hopefully giving some interesting properties to the plastics. But it's early stages yet.
Can I ask, I don't know if this is known yet, but what kind of plastics does it create, or what kind of materials do you think could be created out of mussel shells?
Well, in this case, it's not the mussel that is creating the plastic. The mussel is used as a filler into the plastic. So we could reduce the amount of plastic in theory then, while adding another components. But it's not the mussel that is creating the plastic. It's more incorporated in the plastic.
Okay, I have a question related to the Sustainable Development Goals. Number 17 is partnership, so involving NGOs, researchers, educators, industry in a collaborative action. As you know, Mathilde and Nichelle, you've done your internship in a chemistry lab, and Amy, you have experience with kind of the application of the disastrous application of plastic. Do you think we're missing out on something by bringing all of these partners together? And what do you see in the future and bringing everyone together to fight plastic pollution? It's a big question now.
Yeah. I think nothing bad ever comes of bringing people together to work on a problem together. I think having many people with many backgrounds, many passions, you can find a solution to anything. So I think the more brainstorming we do together, the better.
Yeah, I agree with that. But I also think that maybe it's not exactly your question, but when we're focusing on little projects everywhere on how we can valorize various wastes and how we can pick up plastics, I think we're also forgetting that the most efficient way of reducing this problem or making this problem way smaller would be to just stop using single-use plastics. And that maybe sometimes we can get very excited about small projects, which I think are very important as well for the educational part and also locally. But I do think that actually reducing our plastic production and consumption is the key to success in this case.
And I think a cool topic along that is to kind of have some self-reflection time. I try to do this often, is just look at how much plastic I use during the day, you know, like my computer mouse. Half of the things in this room are made out of plastic. And so it can be interesting to look at how much we rely on it every day as well.
Yeah, I also kind of reflected on that during COVID as well. It was extremely important. Plastic played a really kind of crucial role during that. So it's very difficult to be without, because we've created a world kind of around plastic as well. So I totally agree with what you guys and the chemists are saying. It's very difficult to get these alternatives onto shelves, for sure. You got another question, or Evan? I think, yeah. So maybe a final question for you guys. Thinking of UNOC just around the corner. I'm not involved in any of the plastic pollution sessions, and I've not been looking, but I will after this, I promise. But do you think the world is paying enough attention to plastic pollution? Do you think it's at the top of the agenda? Do you think we're getting there with the movement towards, you know, reducing plastic waste, or do you think we still have a hell of a long way to go? Where do you think we are? Michelle?
I think at one point it was so spoken about that instead of it becoming, you know, the forefront of the discussion and continuing in that way, people have kind of become desensitized to the situation. You know, what can you do? It's a part of our lives now, and that's it. But I think with UNOC and more voices being involved and people taking things a bit more seriously, I'm looking forward to how this progresses, especially in this topic.
And I think getting to see the work that both of you are doing, I think there's a lot of work being done as well in the technology side of it. And maybe it's not accessible now, maybe in 10 years, but I think there's a future in creating new technology, creating new ways to use this environment without relying on plastic so much. And so I think looking into what we can do to change maybe more in the long term. I think UNOC is a good example of thinking on the long term rather than just thinking about tomorrow and the next year. And so maybe that could be a start to that approach.
Yeah.
Okay, well, you go, Matilda.
No, I agree. And I think, like we've discussed and like Amy mentioned, that plastics are everywhere. And what I said before, that we need to stop using plastics. Well, of course, that would be the ideal situation, but then we need something to use instead. And so maybe we're in the forefront of trying to figure out where we can find these materials and how we can develop them. But then hopefully we can look back into the past and say that plastics, we used to use plastics before, but how crazy was that? That's what I hope.
Yeah, make it prehistory. So the session is coming towards an end, and we kind of like to, although we kind of almost, I guess, preempted it, have a kind of like just a 30-second, each speaker give a 30-second kind of like takeaway message for us about the ocean, like plastic and the oceans, and maybe want something to hope for. Perhaps going from Michelle first.
Oh, you've put me on a spot, Thomas.
Perhaps there's no hope.
No, it's just, it's all been said during this session already, but it's just, it's not impossible, although it might seem impossible. It's just maybe we're not trying hard enough. And with all of the new technology, why is it not being directed towards making things more sustainable? And I hope that, the people with the voices, but also the people interested in the results that come out of this will, make the right decisions and bring up the right topics, and hopefully, I don't know. It's just, I hope things go. I'm not very hopeful. I think for the near future.
Michelle, come on.
But as the girls were saying, this is an incredible event for not the immediate future, but for down the line. This will hopefully be something of the past.
And Mathilde?
Well, I would say that I might not always feel very hopeful, but as I work in this lab where we try to actually make a change, I also feel like good things might be coming, and I really hope that we'll see a bigger change soon. And in the meanwhile, I'll just encourage everyone who sees plastic on the street to pick it up, because that gives you some sort of hope as well, to feel like you did a tiny little thing, maybe saved a bird or a fish.
Step by step. That's good. And Amy?
Yeah, just to echo that, I think Michelle said this earlier, that every 90% of plastic ends up in the ocean. So every piece you pick up matters. And I think the most hopeful I've ever felt was when we would go to the islands with these volunteers who just live a normal life usually and come with us for a week. And seeing them see the difference they could make in one island, picking up 1,000 pounds of plastic in a day or two, and seeing how beautiful it can look after, how we can make the place that we're living a better place to live. I think that's the most hope I've ever seen, is when you get to empower people to make change in their world. And so I think if we can both make that change ourselves and empower the folks around us, I think we can make a big difference.
Very nice. We've also had some comments. You girls are very popular. Amazing work, girls. Super proud of you. So you guys are doing a really, really amazing job, for sure. Yeah, this one is a very nice comment for you guys. Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, they keep coming. Okay, keep up. Okay, so thanks for joining us. Thanks for participating. And we're moving on to our next session, which will be starting at 9 o'clock on polar ecosystems. So stay tuned, stay engaged, and see you in half an hour. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
See you soon.
Thank you.